Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm the whiskey nerd, and this week I'm reviewing Basil Hayden's Bourbon to see if I can find out who is this bottle for. But first, let me get into the glass and I'll tell you a bit more about it. Now, Basil Hayden's is owned by the Beam Suntory company, which is a behemoth and owns a lot of brands around the world. They own, of course, Jim Beam and that distillery, but they also own distilleries in Ireland, and from the name Suntory, you can guess that they own the Suntory whiskey brand in Japan. This whiskey, the Basil Hayden's Bourbon, does come from the Jim Beam distillery in Kentucky, and it's kind of one of the portfolio of whiskeys they produce from there, which includes Jim Beam, obviously, but also things like Knob Creek. This is the lightest of the whiskeys, coming in at 40% ABV, whereas some of the other whiskeys like Knob Creek comes in at 50% ABV, so it does have a bit more weight. So this is kind of, you can think of almost as their entry level into the spirit. This is a no age statement Kentucky straight bourbon, which means it's at least 4 years old, but we don't really know much more beyond that. Now, it used to say that it was 8 years old. Now it's just saying that it's been artfully aged, so we don't really know much more beyond that. We don't know how old the bourbon is. We know it's at least 4 years and probably less than 8 years. We also know that it's apparently using the same mash bill as goes into the Knob Creek whiskey. So that's going to be 63% corn, 27% rye, and 10% malted barley. That is a fairly high rye inclusion and should give a good bit of spice. That means the only real difference between this whiskey and the Knob Creek whiskey is perhaps how long it's been aged and the alcohol it's bottled at. I do know that Basil Hayden's is experimenting with different types of whiskeys for their toast. I think they swapped out some of the rye for toasted rice, which might be interesting, but today we're talking about the basic Basil Hayden's Bourbon, so let's go in for the nose. Okay, it's light. It's very light. It's like a watered down bourbon almost. Now, obviously you're getting those bourbon notes. Obviously you get the caramel, you get the oak, touch of vanilla, touch of kind of black pepper spice, maybe some herbal or menthol notes, but it's very subdued. It's very lowered down than you might expect from a normal bourbon. I will say that I'm getting a surprising amount of fruit on this. I mean, maybe because it is at 40% ABV, maybe because they added more water to it, that's maybe diluted some of those that kind of oaky, spicy notes, and maybe allowed the fruitiness to shine through. I wouldn't say it's a very strong fruity flavor, but it's surprisingly fruity compared to other bourbons I've tried. But yeah, it's a very light bourbon on the nose, so let's go in for the palate and see if it delivers something more. Cheers. Okay, on the palate, it does deliver more oak spice. It does deliver more kind of woody, spicy notes. I will say I can immediately tell the finish is gone, so I'll get to the finish in a bit. But on the palate, it had more of a kind of a rye, spicy bite than definitely was apparent in the nose. It's also got more of those kind of citrusy, fruity notes coming through on the palate. And there was something else, but I'm going to go in again for the palate and see what I can find. Okay, I'm getting a bit more of that peppery note coming through, like cracked black pepper coming through. Not a huge amount of it again, but very light, very easy. And I think it's time to talk about the finish, or the lack of finish on this whiskey. Cheers. Okay, so immediately the oak spice fades off, the fruity citrus fades off. The pepperiness does hang on a little bit longer. Like I said, it does have high amounts of rye in the mash bill, so you'd expect that spiciness to hang on. And that's about it. It's very kind of a poof and it's gone whiskey. It's very quick, very clean though. I will say that. This is a very clean whiskey. Like, it's not alcohol burn, there's no real overly strong notes. It's a very clean, crisp, easy to drink bourbon. And that might be exactly the point of this bourbon. I don't think it's going to be my favorite bourbon. I don't think it's going to be a lot of people's favorite bourbons, but it might be the best introduction to bourbon you can find because it is light. It's like a very light, easy to drink bourbon. The oak notes are there, but they're not too strong. The spicy notes are there, but they're not too strong. The vanilla is there and it shines through a bit more. The kind of citrusy notes do shine through a bit more. So I'd say if you're a person who's maybe moving from basic entry-level bottles up to something else, this might be a stepping stone that you use to get your palate used to the more kind of flavorful, strong bourbons. It also does come in, let's face it, a fairly cool bottle. I mean, it has this paper sleeve, has this kind of metal belt around the outside of it. So it is a cool bottle, so it's probably just to maybe help sell that whiskey, maybe help people feel that they're getting a more premium product, to help them move into other whiskeys, because it's very distinctive. You will always recognize Basil Hayden's on the shelf when you see it. It's just not the most flavorful whiskey, so maybe once you've tried it a few times and you've gotten used to the flavors of bourbon, you can probably move on to something else. So yeah, it's an uncomplicated bourbon. I do think it serves a purpose for helping people get into the category. I know there's a lot of love on the internet for people who like to hate on this whiskey. I can agree with that a little bit. I can understand people might say that it's maybe a bit too expensive for what it is, especially considering that Beam Suntory through the Jim Beam distillery are putting out some better, more full-flavoured, more full-bodied whiskies for either the same price or even less. But it does have a purpose. It does have a place in the world of whiskey. I'm not sure it has a full-time place on my whiskey shelf. I think once I finish this bottle, I probably won't be repeating it. I probably won't be replacing it. I'm just still glad I got it so I could try it and I could know what I was talking about. And I think that's all there is to say about this whiskey. I mean, if you like Basil Hayden's, make sure to let me know in the comments below, because I'd like to hear from you. If you maybe used to like Basil Hayden's but you moved on to more full flavored, full body bourbons, make sure to say so, because I know there are a lot of people who love to hate this whiskey, but I do think it serves a purpose for helping people get into the category, especially getting into the more kind of premium, more expensive bourbons. So if you like what you see, make sure you scroll down, hit the thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. I put out whiskey reviews on Wednesdays and cocktail recipes on Fridays, so if you want to see more like this, make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Sláinte.